Hello and welcome everybody. I am Dr. Rupali, at present working as Associate Professor, Department of Critical Care Medicine, IMS and SOM Hospital, Bhubaneswar. Today I will be talking on thrombosis in COVID-19. The overview of my talk is based on incidence and prevalence of COVID-19 associated thrombosis, pathophysiology of COVID-19 associated coagulopathy, its correlating autopsy findings, the various thromboembolic events, how to assess the COVID-19 associated coagulopathy, its management algorithm with special emphasis on optimal thromboprophylaxis, what are the major guidelines recommending on COVID-19 associated thrombosis, and last but not the least, the markers of endothelial injury and the potential therapies directed to it. Coming to epidemiology, overall incidence of venous thrombosis is almost 14% with almost 45% increased incidence in ICU settings. Despite prophylactic anticoagulation, the thromboembolic complications ranges from 18 to 37%. There is increased incidence of arterial thrombosis of up to 3% and extracorporeal circuit thrombosis up to 8%. Also, there is increased reported incidence of post-discharge thrombosis. This data is just to highlight that COVID-19 is associated with increased incidence of thromboembolic complications. Coming to pathophysiology of COVID-19 associated coagulopathy. The pathophysiologic hallmark of COVID-19 disease is mainly based on the four pathophysiological abnormalities. We know the direct cytotoxic effect of the virus by ACE2 receptor mediated entry of the virus to cell. There is dysregulation of the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system so that the potent vasoconstrictors angiotensin 1 and 2 they are not been able to convert to the inactive forms. This leads to vasoconstriction, inflammation, increased vascular permeability and tissue injury. The another concept was endothelial cell damage and thromboinflammation and dysregulated immune response. These four are the pathophysiologic hallmark of COVID-19 disease and its abnormalities. Coming to thromboinflammation in COVID-19. What happens in COVID-19 associated coagulopathy? There is hyperactivation of the platelets. This is due to the disease itself and the associated comorbidities. All these lead to hyperactivation of the platelet. These hyperactivated platelets they react with the damaged or dysfunctional endothelial cells. This dysfunctional endothelial cell could be direct damage by the virus itself or it can be due to cytokine storm mediated. All this lead to increased interaction between the damaged endothelial cells and the hyperactivated platelets leading to thrombus formation and ultimately the embolic phenomena. Coming to thrombocytopathy of COVID-19, rather than physiological platelet activation, what happens in this disease, there is pathological platelet hyperactivation with the COVID-19 infection along with the comorbidities, the various cytokine storm, hypoxia, all these factors lead to hyperactivated platelets. This react with the damaged endothelial cells leading to thrombosis and also there is increased incidence of impaired fibrinolysis. This is documented in patients with COVID-19. The concept of immune thrombosis, where the monocytes and the neutrophil extracellular traps they form a major role. Whenever the virus enters the cell and it interacts with the monocytes, these monocytes they active the tissue factor and they express the tissue factor. We know that tissue factor is important component of extrinsic coagulation pathway. Also, there is increased secretion of inflammatory cytokines by the monocytes. These inflammatory cytokines, especially the interleukin 1 beta and interleukin 18, they lead to activation of the neutrophil extracellular traps. These neutrophil extracellular traps, these are the chromatin of the neutrophil DNA. They form a fibrin mesh. These nets again activate directly the factor 12, which is a component of the intrinsic pathway of the coagulation. That is, monocytes activate both extrinsic and intrinsic pathway of coagulation, and this leads to increased thrombotic complications. These nets, they also activate the von Willebrand factor, leads to increased platelet adhesion, aggregation, and these aggregated platelets react with the damaged endothelial cells. This is the concept of immune thrombosis, which is the hallmark of COVID-19 associated coagulopathy. This slide is just to summarize that these activated macrophages and the damaged endothelial cells, these are the two wheels of vicious cycle of thrombus formation in COVID-19 associated coagulopathy. Coming to the concept of functional endothelial damage, it has been documented that in COVID-19 infection, there is functional change in endothelium. The endothelial cells, they release angiopoietin 2 from the stored granules. That is, in place of angiopoietin 1, there is overactivation of the angiopoietin 2. This turns the anticoagulant and anti-inflammatory features of endothelial cells to the opposite way, which contribute to the increased thrombus formation. There is concept of endothelial glycocalyx damage in COVID-19 associated coagulopathy. This endothelial glycocalyx, it normally regulates the interaction between the endothelial cells and the blood components so that the homeostasis is maintained. In COVID-19 disease, there is documentation of endothelial glycocalyx damage. This leads to increased expression of the thrombotic molecules, increased reactive oxygen species, and thereby increased incidence of thrombosis. We have discussed so much about the pathophysiological findings, but do you have any real-time data for this? Here I am updating the autopsy findings of patients infected with COVID-19 disease, which correlate with the pathophysiologic abnormalities stated so far. This is a data of patient infected with COVID-19 published in NEJM, where they have documented the important angiocentric features and they compared it with influenza A. They found that there was distinctive vascular features of endothelial injury, intravascular virus particles, and disrupted cell membrane. The histopathologic analysis of pulmonary vessels documented widespread thrombosis with microangiopathy. The incidence of microthrombi was almost 9 times more prevalent than that occurred in influenza A. Also, there was finding of intussusceptive angiogenesis of new vessel growth, which was almost 2.7 times higher than influenza. Here in the left side of the panel, the picture shows interstitial and perivascular predominantly lymphocytic pneumonia with multifocal endothelitis in autopsy findings of COVID-19 associated disease, and here in the right side, the alveolar walls with multiple fibrinous microthrombi in the alveolar capillaries are highlighted. The panel A here left side shows the normal electron microscopic features in a healthy lung, but in the right side there is substantial architectural distortion in lungs injured by COVID-19. It is clearly visible the intussusceptive angiogenesis and the vessel wall injury in the right side panel. The architectural distortion in patients infected with COVID-19. The various histopathologic findings also not only lungs in various vessels, almost every vessel of the body can be infected with COVID-19 vasculopathy. That is, in here in the panel A and B, the viral inclusion bodies are shown in the endothelial cells of the glomerular capillaries. In C and D, there is mononuclear cell infiltration in the intima of the large vessels. This is just to highlight that every vessel of the body can be affected by the COVID-19. What are the various thromboembolic events documented? This is a multi-center cohort study published in Intensive Care Medicine where they have documented various thromboembolic complications associated with COVID-19 disease. This ranged from pulmonary embolism, DVT, myocardial infarction, cerebral ischemic attacks, limb ischemia, mesenteric ischemia, increased incidence of circuit clotting of RRT and ICMA circuit clotting. And of their cohort of patients, almost 70% of patients were on prophylactic anticoagulant and 30% were on therapeutic anticoagulation. Despite that, they developed so much thromboembolic complications. This is another retrospective data of almost 1100 patients over 8 French ICUs. They have very well documented in pictorial format the incidence of thromboembolic complication. Just to highlight that every vessel can be infected. In their cohort, they found ischemic stroke, aortic thrombi, ACS, splenic thrombosis, portal vein thrombosis, DVT, peripheral arterial occlusion, limb ischemia, renal thrombosis, upper limb DVT, and PE. Then how to assess the coagulopathy of COVID-19? This is a very nice flow diagram which has shown that in COVID-19 associated coagulopathy, there is elevated D-dimer with or without thrombosis, and there is typical findings of CT scan with increased incidence of increased 1 Willebrand factor, factor 8, and increased D-dimer level and increased fibrinogen level. Marked thrombocytopenia and marked prothrombin time prolongation is quite rare in patients infected with COVID-19. If these findings are there, then other differentials should be kept in mind and should be ruled out. What is the point of care test Stelling in COVID-19 associated coagulopathy? This is a retrospective data of 64 patients of severe COVID-19. The data suggests that 50% of the patients were in hypercoagulable range with R and K time below the lower limit of normal in almost 45% of patients, and 70% of patients had alpha angle above the reference range and maximum amplitude above the reference range. As we have discussed, we have to look for these parameters: D-dimer, prothrombin time, platelet count in fibrinogen. And if these are as per the COVID-19 associated coagulopathy, then we have to start prophylactic anticoagulant in all hospitalized patients. This is data from ISTH, International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis. They have highlighted that you start with prophylactic anticoagulant in all hospitalized patients, but if the SIC score, that is the sepsis-induced coagulopathy score, is more than or equal to 4 and or D-dimer level is more than 6 times the upper limit of normal, they have recommended to start therapeutic dose of anticoagulation, which can be associated with better prognosis related to mortality. This is the SIC score, which includes the platelet count, prothrombin time, 4 organ SOFA score, and the total SIC score. If it is more than or equal to 4 with increased D-dimer, then high risk for increased thromboembolic complications, and ISTH is recommending to start them on therapeutic dose of anticoagulation. Coming to the treatment for COVID-19 associated thrombosis. The most debated topic is optimal thromboprophylaxis. What is it the prophylactic dose, the intermediate dose, or the therapeutic dose? There is still uncertainty about optimal prophylactic regimen. This leads to variability in the expert recommendations, hospital policies, and even the bedside clinician decision. Patients with critically ill COVID-19 with D-dimer of 6 times the upper limit of normal or SIC score more than 4, BT risk scores, and clinical criteria. These are the important criteria to look for deciding the optimal thromboprophylaxis. The combination of these, that is the biomarker, risk scores, and clinical criteria, not only the single thing, the combination of three things should be taken into account while deciding the optimal dose of thromboprophylaxis. What are the major trials on the thromboprophylactic dose? One is the REMAP-CAP, ATTACK, and ACTIVE. They have recently published, and another is the INSPIRATION trial. The INSPIRATION trial, it is a multicenter trial in ICU patients, and they have compared the prophylactic dose with the intermediate dose, and the REMAP-CAP ACTIVE ATTACK, they have compared the prophylactic dose to therapeutic dose of anticoagulation both in ICU patients. This is the INSPIRATION trial who compared the prophylactic with the intermediate dose, and they found that the composite adjudicated acute thromboembolism and all-cause mortality. There was no difference between the intermediate dose and the standard dose. And they concluded that patients admitted to ICU with COVID-19 intermediate dose anticoagulation did not result in significant difference in their primary outcome, which was their composite outcome of thromboembolism and mortality, and they did not support routine use of intermediate dosing in unselected patients admitted to ICU. This INSPIRATION trial conducted in unselected patients. This is just to highlight that in unselected patients that you should not be starting the increased dose of thromboprophylaxis in all patients, that they have also highlighted. This is the interim analysis data of REMAP-CAF, F4 and ATTACK investigators. It's a multi-platform RCT of almost 1074 patients with severe COVID-19. They defined severe COVID-19 with need of organ support, high flow nasal cannula, non-invasive or invasive mechanical ventilation, vasopressor and inotrope support. That is, patients admitted to ICU with respiratory and cardiovascular organ supports. They were their major inclusion criteria, and what they found that median organ support free days was comparable between the two groups. The hospital survival also comparable. The bleeding events were less 3 to 2% in the two groups, and they concluded that therapeutic dose of anticoagulation did not improve hospital survival or days free of organ support. These REMAP-CAP ACTIVE and ATTACK, they have come with the final report. This is just 3 days back in August 4 and published in NEJM. What they got that there is no difference in organ support free days up to day 21 in patients receiving therapeutic dose with the prophylactic dose. This is in critically ill patients with COVID-19. They did not get any benefit of increased dose of thromboprophylaxis. And they also published the data in non-critically ill patients with COVID-19. In there, they found overall benefit of therapeutic dose of anticoagulation compared to the usual prophylactic dose. Coming to what are the guidelines recommending till now. After the guidelines published, these major trials came into picture. So guidelines need to be updated. But till now, what are they telling? The ISTH is recommending increased dose in high risk patients, and the American Society of Hematology also, they are suggesting to use increased intensity thromboprophylaxis in high risk patients. Whereas the CHEST guideline do not recommending increased dose of thromboprophylaxis. Coming to post-discharge prophylaxis, this is also an important topic. What is the International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis recommending? They are recommending extended duration of thromboprophylaxis with either LMWH or direct oral anticoagulant, preferably for 2 to 6 weeks post-hospital discharge in selected COVID-19 patients. What were those selected COVID-19 patients? They recommend patients with improved VT score. Here in the left side panel, I have quoted the improved VT score, which includes the patients with previous history of venous thromboembolism, patients with known thrombophilia, current limb paresis or paralysis, history of cancer, ICU stay, complete immobilization for more than 1 day, and increased age more than 60. If the score is more than 4, with elevated D-dimer more than 2 times the upper limit of normal, then this patient should be considered for extended duration of thromboprophylaxis, almost up to 1 month, preferably with a near oral anticoagulant. Coming to near oral anticoagulants in COVID-19, these drugs have various potential therapeutic benefits. That is, they have anticoagulant effect. Along with that, they have antiviral property, then anti-inflammatory properties. These are the mainly factor 10 inhibitors. But these NOACs are not at all without any concerns in patients with COVID-19. There is increased documented incidence of drug-drug interaction. These drugs have increased half-life, which can be detrimental when any urgent invasive procedures are being planned, or there is rapid worsening of the renal or liver dysfunction. And though FDA has approved their antidote, there is always a question mark about the availability and cost of the antidotes for their overdose. What are the guidelines are recommending about NOACs in COVID-19? The ISTH is recommending for rivaroxaban or betrixaban in non-ICU settings for extended thromboprophylaxis in treatment of VT. That is, for treatment of VT, they are recommending to continue with parenteral anticoagulations, and they can be shipped over to these NOACs for extended prophylaxis. For post-discharge prophylaxis in high-risk patients up to 30 days and extended therapeutic use in confirmed VT cases. The NIH guideline, National Institute of Health, they are also recommending to continue post-discharge prophylaxis in high-risk patients with the NOACs. Do we have any follow thrombotic events data, which is mainly the image confirmed? There is very less data about follow-up of thromboembolic events after these patients get discharged from our hospital or ICU settings. And this is a study, and they have documented the venous thromboembolism following hospitalization with 90-day follow-up. They have followed up with image confirmed with Doppler or any other imaging findings. They found that there is incidence of almost 7.2% at 90 days after admission, increased incidence of thromboembolic complications, and the rate of symptomatic VT in this group at 42 days after discharge was almost 2.6%. And this study highlights the need for large prospective RCTs of thromboprophylaxis after discharge in patients with COVID-19. We have discussed a lot about the existing anticoagulant regimen on and all that. But we know that COVID-19 associated coagulopathy is related to endotheliopathy also. So, do you have any therapies which is directing to endothelium to prevent this COVID-19 associated coagulopathy? At first, are you monitoring the endothelium? There are various evolving endothelial markers like von Willebrand factor antigen, soluble P-selectin, E-selectin, angiopoietin 2, thrombomodulin, and markers of endothelial glycocalyx damage. These are the various endothelial markers which are evolving for monitoring. This is a study where they have highlighted the dynamic angiopoietin 2 assessment for prognostication aspect in patients with COVID-19. Here in the panel A and B, the 3-day course of in-hospital mortality and angiopoietin 2 trend, they found that the dynamic angiopoietin 2 had ROC of AU-ROC of almost more than 0.8 to predict in-hospital mortality. Similarly, in the panel E and F, they found they have ROC of more than 0.9 to predict the non-resolving pulmonary conditions. In the red line, the angiopoietin 2 increase at least twofold from the baseline, and this blue line is there is no increase. This here in the figure, if there is increase in angiopoietin 2, there is decrease in cumulative survival. There are two studies where they have highlighted the endotheliopathy with the markers of endothelial injury, and this first one is the data of 68 patients published in Lancet Hematology, where the von Willebrand factor, soluble P-selectin, thrombomodulin, they were significantly elevated in ICU patients with COVID-19. And another study where they found angiopoietin 2 is a marker of endothelial activation, is a good prognostic marker for ICU admission in COVID-19 patients. We have discussed a lot about endothelium, but do you have any therapies directed to it? The various proposed potential therapies are anticoagulants, fibrinolytics, antiplatelets, antithrombin, immunomodulators, targeted monoclonal antibody, and defibrotide. This defibrotide is a new molecule. I'll be discussing it. This is a polyanionic agent, which is a pleiotropic mixture of oligonucleotide derived from the porcine interstitial mucosa DNA. Its mechanism of action is not clear, but various mechanisms have been put forward, like it protects the endothelium, it modulates the platelet activation, it potentiates fibrinolysis, it decreases thrombin generation and its activity, and reduces circulating level of tissue plasminogen activator inhibitor. Here in this picture, the defibrotide, when they have added to COVID-19 serum, there is decreased expression of the E-selectin, surface, ICAM, and VCAM, which are the various adhesion molecules. That is, this defibrotide decrease the expression of adhesion molecules, which is important step for COVID-19 associated coagulopathy. And the protective histone neutralizing properties of this polyanionic agent have been highlighted. We note the histone with coming into picture with the pathophysiology of COVID-19, which is the important component of the neutrophil extracellular trap, which I have explained before in the pathophysiology of immune thrombosis related to COVID-19. To summarize, there is no test or biomarker for initiating therapy. In mild to moderate illness, prophylactic anticoagulation with almost enoxaparin 40 mg OD is needed. In severe illness, therapeutic dose of 1.5 mg per kg or 1 mg per kg twice daily dose. The therapeutic dalteparin, we know, almost 200 units per kg per day, and prophylactic is 2500 to 5000 units per day. And while discharging these patients in mild to moderate illness, we don't need any anticoagulant, but following severe disease, so discharge them with Novax, with Dabigatran or Rivaroxaban. For arterial thrombotic events, there are no specific guidelines related to COVID-19 associated arterial thrombosis. The management and diagnostic algorithm is completely based on the organ specific guidelines published so far. Thank you.